Shirley Sandusky was born on March 10, 1932, to her father Ira B. Sandusky and her mother Genevieve Sandusky. There were many events that affected Shirley's life, but the most significant was her move to Oregon in 1944. Shirley never thought of herself as being poor until she went to Oregon. Her daddy was asked to help as a preacher, earning a wage of only $45 a month. And because of this, he also worked in a lumber yard for extra money. During the move, they had to sell almost all of their furniture because they couldn't afford to ship it. Only 2 beds, a table, her mom's antique dishes, and a piano were shipped, and when they arrived in Oregon, all of the antiques had either been broken or lost. Shirley's mother was devastated because all of the antiques were her mother's, who had passed, and on top of that, she could not afford to go see her sickly father. Her mom slowly crept into depression and lost interest in everything after that. It was Shirley's dad that became more involved in her life. He helped her pick out her wedding dress, helped her plan her wedding, and so forth. When they first arrived in Oregon, they lived in a rundown motel for several months, and it was the first time that my grandmother ever felt poor, and the first time she ever had people make fun of her. Later on, they built a house and lived in it, but it was never finished. Upstairs, there were simply boards, and walls were yet to be built. Then, Shirley started to grow an inferiority complex when she grew 7 inches and 1 year, had to get glasses, and quickly became clumsy. When she was only 10 years old, she had to pay adult fees at the movies because they didn't believe she was a child. She never had nice clothes, so when she was inducted into a society at school, she had to borrow a dress from a girl that was 6 inches shorter than her. By the time that her daddy's congregation would grow, and they would start paying him a decent wage, he would go and start a new congregation. Shirley and her parents lived in Oregon for a total of 3 years, and she said, "Those years in Oregon had some of the hardest impressions on my life." The next event that significantly affected Shirley's life was when she came to Abilene Christian College in 1950. Not knowing anyone, she traveled 1,800 miles away from home to gain independence and discovery of who she was. Although Shirley loved her daddy, he was very domineering and did not foster independence in other people. Friends from Riverside, California said that it was the best thing that had ever happened to her to get 1,800 miles away so she could think for herself. On their way there, Shirley and her daddy got in a bad wreck, and Shirley thought that her dreams of going to college had nosedived, but luckily her dad pushed on. At the end of the journey, he handed her $100 and said, "This is only for necessities." But this was the first time that she had been given money independently. She was only used to handing her dad paychecks as soon as she received them. As she looked around Abilene, she saw that every young woman was wearing a satin dress to church, and Shirley only had a wool suit for Sundays. So she took the $100 and bought herself a satin dress, a hat, a purse, and on top of charging all of her bills to her school account. After her father became livid, he only gave her $5 a week to live off of. She received $7 her senior year. The average money at that time spent in 1950 was $20 to $25 a week. This measly $5 took care of laundry, school supplies, and the everyday necessity. This also only provided Shirley with 1 meal a day. Shirley wanted to be a set designer and worked on all the sets for the plays during her freshman and sophomore year, but when her daddy heard of this, he said she could either be a teacher, a secretary, or she could come home. Naturally, Shirley chose to be a first-grade teacher. While going to ACC, Shirley met several friends and felt like she wasn't such an oddity anymore. She became a member of Kojo Kai, was in a service organization, met my grandfather, and felt like there were people in her life that were actually interested in her. Shirley said that if she didn't go to Abilene, she doesn't know if she would have stayed in the church. Her daddy was a hellfire and damnation preacher who constantly preached on how everybody was sinners, needed to repent, or they were going to hell. It was in Abilene for the first time that she heard about the love of Christ and was blown away in chapel the first time she heard everybody sing together. To this day, she is a member and actually the president of the alumni chorus. Because of ACC, Shirley has made friends of now 60 years and is continuing to build those friendships. Abilene made her feel like she had the ability to do something, and it is quite evident that that feeling turned into reality that has infected her entire family. Shirley Sandusky is one of my ultimate heroes because of the effect that she has intentionally placed on my life. Because her mother struggled with depression, Shirley learned how to cook, sew, and craft from her neighbor. Shirley has been my primary teacher of cooking, sewing, and crafting ever since I was a little girl. Because Shirley learned about love and grace at a later age, she writes a thank you letter for every favor, bakes soup for every sick friend, and looks at her family through the eyes of Jesus instead of her own. Because Shirley had many financial problems in Oregon and in college, she and my grandfather have paid for my two brother and I's full tuition here at ACU. And because Shirley has deeply received the love of Jesus, she relentlessly serves her family in an 81-year-old woman's body with a bad hip and a swollen knee. You know that someone has heaven's perspective when they refuse to sit down and eat before everyone else has gotten their food. Shirley Sandusky will forever be my role model on how to love better.